your turn. Shayla Perez is a bold Christian communicator, content creator, former youth pastor who has a heart for helping the next generation build their lives on a biblical worldview. After 7 years of discipling young people in East Los Angeles, she now uses her voice to challenge, to equip young Christians, to let their faith shape how they live so they can impact culture with truth and courage and conviction. So whether it's online or on the stage, Shayla is passionate about raising up a generation who loves Jesus and values life and aren't afraid to speak in a confused world. I want to give a couple of shout outs before Shayla makes her way to the stage. I want to say thank you to, I saw my friend Shalina from All Life. All Life is here at the tables. First Choice and Embrace Grace is one of the tables here that we would love for you to visit. The Loot 2 Project and Good News Club of Southern Nevada. I saw a Loot 2 Project t-shirt around a moment ago. What a great ministry. Young Americans for Liberty. Red Rock World Missions, we have to thank for this very conference. So thank you so much. And there is a table that is labeled Hope and Healing. We want you to be able to visit that today. This, again, that is one of the most important things about today, is to find hope and to find healing. That's what this is all about, okay? So please help me welcome Shayla Perez.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good morning. Well, first I just want to say this is an honor and a privilege to be here today amongst my brothers and sisters in Christ. I assume almost everyone here is probably Christian, not just pro-life. So I first wanted to say, yes, there we go. I just wanted to say that I'm honored to be with you guys today, and I don't take moments like this lightly. I know that you guys just experienced some preaching. Men, you just were riled up. He just made a grunt. But for my time today with you, I don't want to just speak to the men. I want to speak to the women. I want to speak to all of us, because all of us, instead of preaching at you and riling you up, I actually would like to take my time to expose a lie that we've all believed, a lie that goes pretty far back. I would like to talk about feminism and the betrayal of women. Radium was discovered and added to the periodic table in 1898. Radium was a naturally occurring chemical known for its radioluminescence. That's just a fancy word for saying that it glows. It glows a green, bright color. And before the days of LED screens and smart watches that tell us the time, there was a company in New Jersey called the Radium Luminous Material Corporation. And it launched a new product in 1924 that would be revolutionary for its time, because it would allow people to be able to tell the time in the dark. Using radium paint, the idea was that they were going to paint the little dials and the numbers on the clock so that people could see in the dark. But there was a challenge, because these little tiny wristwatches required very small and precise hands to carefully paint on tiny little details of the dial. And so the company began hiring young girls starting at the age of 12, 13, 14 years old, because with their little hands, they could come into the factory and they can precisely paint these watches. And in order to ensure precision, they were giving them very fine paintbrushes, where they were instructed to take their fine paintbrush, put it in their mouth, to be able to sharpen the brush and dip it into the paint every single time between painting the dials. The job was highly sought after, because this job, due to the high demand of this amazing new product, they were willing to pay women at a premium to come into the factories and do this. Some of these women at 14 years old were making as much, if not more, than their fathers were making. And so it wasn't just considered a highly sought after job because of the financial gain. Also, it was considered glamorous because at the time, beauty products were putting radium inside of the beauty creams to give women a natural glow. These women could actually get that natural glow just by working at the Radium Watch Company. We have diaries of these young women saying that if they had any leftover paint at the end of their hard work day, they would dip their finger into the paint pot and put it on their lips and their teeth in order to have that natural glowing beauty enhancement for free. So now this job is financially seen as glamorous for women, but what seemed like progress and what was told to these women that would be good for their financial future and even for their physical beauty, it turned into a nightmare. It was actually not empowerment because radium is radioactive, meaning that it is toxic and carcinogenic. I would love to turn your eyes to a screen of a picture of the radium, a woman who worked in the Radium Watch Company. This is actually a picture of multiple of those women. They're all in their teenage years. This was taken by a local newspaper advocating for what seemed like women empowerment at the time for these women. And from the third woman from the right, her name was Molly. And when Molly started working at the factory at 14, by the age of 19, she started experiencing tremendous tooth pain and toothaches, where she would have to go into the dentist, and in order to try to numb her pain, they would extract teeth. But when they would extract her teeth, they were finding giant ulcers in her mouth. She was desperate, and by the time she was 19, most of her teeth were gone. The infection spread, and one day as she went into the dentist's office desperate for some help, he lifted her jaw, and the jaw fell in his hand. Days later, it completely broke off, and dozens of girls reported pain in their mouths, legs, and entire bodies. Molly, on the screen here, she died at the age of 24, and it was told on her death certificate, the doctor reported that the cause of her death was syphilis. As time went on, most of her coworkers followed her to the grave. But the company were telling women, don't worry, radium's harmless, because they were afraid that if they were exposed, women would know that really what was promised to them as empowerment was causing death and decay in their bodies. Feminism, like radium, was introduced with the promise of light to women. Economic freedom, social mobility, liberation from outdated gender roles. The first wave of feminism fought for what we would say is admirable things, right? The right to vote. The second wave pushed for women in the workforce. The assurance that this was the path to power for women. It glowed with the promise of freedom. It glittered with the illusion of choice. Before we dive in, I just want to be very clear that my hope today is not to get you to try to hate feminists. My hope is not that you walk away today saying, oh, I'm going to snarl at every single woman I see that proclaims to be a feminist online. That's not my goal here, actually. My goal is only to empower you with information and empower you with some history so that you can understand how we've got here today. Why women have now changed to the idea that it's liberating to kill babies in the womb. How did we get here? Because we didn't get here overnight. I want you to walk away saying, I have empathy and sympathy for the women who have been deceived and betrayed. I want to take time to go through history of all the waves of feminism, and then I want to expose the dark anti-child ideology that crept in. I want to expose the misery of hookup culture. We've already heard some of these concepts today. That was masqueraded as freedom. And then I want to reveal how this leads to abortion that has become feminism's bitter root. Is that okay with you guys today? Can I have a little bit of your time? In the first wave of feminism, although the movement started with, like I mentioned, some just causes, like the women's right to vote, to own property, to receive an education, to be treated as full citizens under the law, even that foundation of the movement was built on very dangerous, radioactive, if you will, premises. I wish I could tell you that the feminist movement started out by asking the question, how can we help women? How can we value women? How can we uplift them to be seen as equal amongst men? That would have actually been, for the time, a good question to ask. But instead, it actually started with a different question. The question was, how can we help women become like men? And not just any men. They weren't looking to the Bible for their aspirations. They were looking to moral, corrupt men in a sinful society and said, how can we be like them? So that question, whether they realized it or not, it shaped the movement from the very beginning, which is why I believe feminism at its core betrays women. Because early feminists, even though they didn't see abortion as a right, they condemned it actually. Feminists like Susan B. Anthony, she wrote in her newspaper, The Revolution, she said that abortion is a horrible crime of murder, and she called it dreadful, not a mark of progress. The women saw abortion not as empowerment, but as a sign of a broken system. Alice Paul, a key suffragist and the author of the original Equal Rights Amendment, she said that abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. And in the eyes of first-wave feminists, abortion was seen not as liberation, but actually of oppression. In other words, these women didn't see abortion as a choice. They saw it as a tragedy. But they were blaming this tragedy on the abandonment of male irresponsibility. But because, once again, the question was not, how do we help women become equal? It was, how do we make women like men? It was only a matter of time that they took their frustration that they were blaming towards men, that they shifted it towards pregnancy. Because being seen as a man is you're able to have pregnancy. You're able to have sexual freedom without any of the ties to pregnancy. Real justice in a corrupt culture of men abandoning women, it would have said, we as women are going to value ourselves so much that we refuse to have sex with men who will not commit to us in marriage and refuse to raise our children. That's what real feminism would have actually done. But instead, they said, if men get to sleep around without the consequences, why can't we? And that is the corrupt idea that reared its ugly head, starting in the first wave, moving to the second. The second wave in the 1960s and 80s, we've already heard about the sexual revolution. I won't go too far into that. But with feminism in that same era of the 60s and 70s, it looked to break down the barriers of employment and education, and it pushed for equal legal protections. Those are all good things. However, that ideology came with a narrative that sex and family would have dire consequences. The era of sexual revolution was told to women that in order to be truly free, they need to engage in casual sex without commitment. Sexual liberation was seen as liberation to all people. And with the development of the birth control pill in 1960 and the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision in 1973 of legalizing abortion, they were hailed as triumphs for women's autonomy. So now at last, women can behave like men, and they can be without the burden of children. They're not tied down by marriage or motherhood. I want us to ask ourselves, what's the underlying message in there? It communicates to women that fertility and their capacity to bear children, a core aspect of what it means to be a woman, those are liabilities that need to be overcome. Motherhood, subtly or unsubtly, was denigrated now to a second-class ambition. Feminist voices explicitly attacked traditional family in this era of feminism, in the second wave. Simone de Beauvoir, a feminist writer, she declared in 1976 that no woman should be authorized to stay at home to raise her children. Authorized. Women should not have that choice, because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one. I just want us to let that sink in for a second. A major voice in the feminist movement has this elitist and cruel view, this irony that if women don't know what's good for them, so society needs to coerce away them from the idea of motherhood, because she feared that too many women would choose family over careers if they were given that chance. If you think the slogan, "My body, my choice," is something that only exists in this generation, or maybe it came out of modern feminism, that's actually not true. It is a cry from the feminist movement in the second wave. And it didn't appear out of thin air. That cry of "my body, my choice" came out of an ideology within the feminist movement in radical individualism. At its core, the feminist movement began to exalt individual autonomy above all else, above community, above moral duty, above being unbound in responsibility to anyone, not a husband, not the church, certainly not an unborn child. I quoted Susan B. Anthony earlier, and although great, I'm glad she wasn't for abortion, her roots were for women's liberation from men, in which she rewrote the Bible to produce what's called the Woman's Bible, and she held the character of Eve as the heroine and Satan as her liberator. It is on the internet, you can find it. Susan B. Anthony, The Feminist Bible. So now we have this idea that the abortion debate was actually never about health or women's rights. It was about redefining womanhood altogether through the lens of power and independence, even if it comes at the expense of someone else's life. The feminist idealistic ideology taught that freedom is the highest good for women, even if it requires the destruction of the most vulnerable among us. And so if an inconvenient pregnancy has occurred among us, well, abortion is going to be the rescue for women to keep her on track. And by the end of the 1970s, the feminist movement had firmly linked women's liberation with abortion rights. And no longer was abortion spoken of, even by its advocates, as a sad necessity. Instead, it was championed as a positive good, a non-negotiable pillar of equality. And that is what set the stage for what has followed, the third wave of feminism in the 1990s, going into the fourth wave, the present. The third wave of feminism in the 1990s further embraced individualism, sexual empowerment culture. This wave claimed to give women ownership over their sexuality and that they need to express it however they please. Who's to tell you what to do with your body and who you want to sleep with? That is between you and yourself. That is what has been told to women. No longer was free love just for the hippies and the 70s, but now it is commonly practiced amongst the population at large. The pattern of casual sex and hookup culture and anything goes relativism, entertainment and pop culture reflects the normalization of casual sex. And by the 2010s, the fourth wave has now fully emerged, and it is driven by social media activism and intersectionality. We started hearing slogans like girl power. We started being told that women need to belittle men in order to elevate themselves. Although throughout history, we see ebbs and flows of culture saying, women are better than men and, women are the moral superiority. Now that wasn't just an idea. Now it is at the forefront of the Me Too movement, forefront of the ideas that women need to be believed over men because women have a moral superiority over men. The belittling of men is now at the forefront of all of the feminist talking points that the feminists can't hide anymore. The wave we're now in has brought this sex-positive, sex-obsessed culture, and in a wave that paradoxically demands that we believe all women, it also insists that we cannot define what a woman is, because it has been tied into gender ideology. And through it all, abortion is championed. Shouted, celebrated, funded, hashtags like shout your abortion. We have women proudly wearing I had an abortion shirts at feminist rallies. Essential health care is now what abortion is for women. And the idea of restraint, chastity, selectivity in your sexual partner, no. Those are all patriarchal shackles, we've been told, that now we have been liberated from as women. So in a culture of one-night stands, Tinder swipes, and friends with benefits that have taken root on college campuses, empowering women so that women are now better off. Are they better off? No. And the social sciences back this up 100%, that women are not happier for it. Actually, they are measurably more miserable than ever before. The social science research tells us that that in the survey, 1 in 4 women who've decided to have promiscuous sex with their partner regret that encounter the day after. 78% of women and 72% of men who had uncommitted sexual experience have regret. That means this is far from being sexually liberated. Women are left empty. We were lied to, women. We were lied to. Hookup culture and sex without responsibility do not make us happy. Instead, they make us miserable. We're finding that sex is actually the most beneficial and the most cherished. And we have received actually the most gratification when it is a committed, lifelong marriage covenant. That is what science is telling us. Instead, we have young women with skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, STDs, trauma. We have a recent study that tells us 1 in 4 women are on psychiatric medications. We have women in their 30s who are devastated because they were told all their life in their college and 20s that you can settle down whenever you want. And now that's actually harder than they were actually told to believe. Now that they're off the sexual carousel, then they want to start a family, it's too late for them. We have a society in which 1 in 4 women have had an abortion in their lifetime. And often, she feels like she has no other choice than to take on and embrace this feminism. Yeah. And that word choice is the cruelest irony of it all. Because feminism preached choice. But are these women truly choosing for themselves? Or have they been hemmed in by a culture that no longer supports life, therefore no longer supports their choice if they make the wrong choice? That's right. Women choose abortion precisely because they feel desperate and alone. No thanks to the feminist dogma that insists that we need a man or that having a baby is a roadblock to their fulfillment. Statements of fear are often spoken at pro-choice rallies and feminist gatherings. They're said, well, if women don't have access to this healthcare, this free healthcare that is a woman's right, well, then if she gets pregnant, her life will be ruined. If women don't have access to this essential right, women will have to give up on their dreams. Do you hear the irony there? Right. Is that not belittling and insulting to insinuate that a woman cannot be a mother and also finish her degree? Is it women's empowerment to tell a woman that if she dares takes 18 years to raise a child, she'll never be able to start a business or maybe pursue a career in the sciences? How is it that that is women's empowerment? I believe, and I hope that you are starting to see, that that's actually a very low view of women. We started as a plea of equality in the feminist movement, but frankly, it has turned into a cult of unbridled sexual freedom and child sacrifice. Because that is what abortion is. It is saying, let's sacrifice our babies, our unborn children, at the altar of what? The altar of convenience and career. Because in the feminist movement, women are more seen as valuable when they have a briefcase in hand, not a baby. I want us to consider Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, how she was an early birth control advocate, and she was praised by the feminists. But Sanger, the dark history in the feminist movement is pretty clear by Sanger's own words. She said that the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. See, this was before the political correct time where we had to pretend like it wasn't a killing. She was actually very honest when she said, we believe in killing the unborn. Sanger's writings are full of dehumanizing rhetoric. She referred to society's poor, disabled, and minority populations as human weeds. And she advocated that we need to thin them out through birth control and sterilization. There is a reason that we have in letters that she wrote proving that she was putting abortion clinics, or she wanted to put abortion clinics in minority areas for the act of eugenicist. Wow. Classism was rooted in this ideology. I myself have encountered these ideas amongst my own peers. I've heard plenty of eugenicist ideas among my people that I've talked to about this. I've spoken to dozens of young people online who will try to rationalize abortion. I host TikTok debates sometimes where I'll just have behind me, I'm pro-life, prove me wrong, in order to try to start conversation amongst Gen Z and young people and get them thinking, because they've been in most likely the public education that has told them this is a woman's right their whole life. So I'm hoping to try to pop them out of that bubble, out of that worldview, because nobody else is asking them those questions. So therefore, I have experienced time and time and again, young people spewing classism from their lips, where they will say, it is better for a child to not be born at all than if that child might have a hard life. Well, what about the foster care system? It's so corrupt, it's so bad, but what if that child's born poor? What if? They don't even realize eugenicist ideas and classism is rooted in everything they've been told. And what has been pitched to them as feminist empowerment, women empowerment, is actually harming the next generation, and that we are killing our own. Yes. The truth is that bodily autonomy has never meant to be the right to harm another body, because autonomy ends when another life begins. Feminist ideology says that women's bodily autonomy is the highest virtue. But in the case of pregnancy, it's not just one body involved. It's two bodies involved, two heartbeats, two sets of DNA. And the child in the womb is not an extension of the mother's body, unlike we hear from professors that will call it a fetus, which it is a fetus, but they're using that because they don't want to say the word child, or it is a parasite sucking life from the mother. I cannot tell you how many teenagers I've talked to who are pro-choice feminists that use the word parasite to describe a child in the womb. But the child is not a parasite. It is a separate human being residing within a woman, and that child's life should not be subjected to someone else's autonomy. We don't accept bodily autonomy as a justification for in any other context when it involves the harm or death of a person. No one says, my body, my choice, to justify drunk driving, to justify rape. No one argues that bodily autonomy gives someone the right to commit violence against another. So why is this logic suddenly accepted, hook, line, and sinker amongst young people? It seems to me it is because they've been told their entire lives by feminist ideology that this is a woman's issue and that women hold a hierarchy on this specific topic, which is why they'll say, no uterus, no opinion. Specifically, it's funny, they'll say that this is a woman's issue, but they don't care about hearing what this woman has to say about this issue. This is the dark history of the feminist movement. It is too often whitewashed, and I get it. I'm a female leader. I like the idea that maybe feminism started with how can we bring women to be seen as equal amongst men? But that's not what it is. That's not what it is, especially today. Many prominent feminist thinkers were in bed with eugenicists and held twisted views of children, that they were obstacles or they were pests. And while feminism treats pregnancy like it is a disease or that children are disposable, it also protects abusers from being held accountable. Can we call this pro-women? The bitter irony is that the feminist ideology encourages women to destroy the lives of women in the womb. All around the world, baby girls are simply aborted because they are girls. Sex-selective abortion has been skewed in a ratio of men to women in countries like China and India. Globally, millions of females are missing because they were never allowed to be born, simply because they were a woman. So much for the sisterhood of feminism. More babies have died from abortion than all soldiers in every world war ever. Wow. This is not a women's movement. It tells women that we have freedom, but instead it means that we need to kill our children. It protects abusers from erasing the evidence of their crimes, and it hands us birth control instead of offering support from men and women to take responsibility for their actions. This is not a women's movement, ladies and gentlemen. This is a betrayal of women. Yeah, that's good. I want to end my talk today I want to illuminate Christianity in the ancient world. Christian ethics and sex life were a radical improvement for women. In the early church, we forbade abortion and infanticide in a culture, Greco-Roman culture, where it was widely practiced. Children, especially infants, were commonly seen as less than fully human in their culture. Does that sound familiar? Unwanted babies were often left to die in the wilderness. They were left on trash heaps. Historian O.M. Bakey notes that the ancient Greece and Roman children had a very low status, and they were seen as burdens until they finally could grow up and work. And in this dark context came Christianity to bring a different ethic. Jesus welcomed the little children, and he said, to such of these belong the kingdom of God. There's a reason that the disciples said, leave him alone, you're bothering him. It's because they lived in a culture where children were seen as burdens. And instead, Jesus said, this is the kingdom of God. Let them come to me. You must become like them if you want to enter the kingdom of God. He was turning a society on its head. The diarchy, which is the church orders of early history, it strictly forbid the practices of abortion and infanticide. As a result, women were flocking to Christianity, historians write, because they valued children, and in valuing children, naturally, they uplifted women in motherhood in a time that degraded women and left them and abandoned them. Christianity was the best thing to ever happen to women and children in the ancient world, scholars will say. And the bitter irony that we have today is that those who stand against abortion are often labeled anti-woman. Throughout history, the rejection of infanticide and abortion and the child's right to life, those dignified women and empowered mothers. This is far from being anti-woman. From a Christian perspective, the value of human life and the equality of men and women, they both come from the doctrine of the Imago Dei, that we were both made in the image of God, and that is how we find our value. God declares, let us make man in our image. And in that text, Genesis 1:27, there's a shift from them that is very significant because it's highlighting that both men and women together bear God's image on equal terms. Yeah. So when people say, Shayla, you're a strong leader, you have opportunities today because of the feminist movement. Why wouldn't you be a feminist? I want to simply remind them of the truth that what we see in church history, women were protected and gained more rights than ever before under Christianity, under the teachings of Jesus, under the teaching that we are made in the Imago Dei. And I believe we actually could have gotten here where women had equal rights in society without the destruction that came from feminism. The Gospels always honored women without having to sacrifice who they are, always honored women without having to belittle men. Jesus never needed feminism. He needed to lift women up through putting us in the perspective that we were made in the Imago Dei. He was doing that long before feminism ever even tried. So my My plea to you today, my call to you today in closing, is that we need to reject the message that our fertility is a curse and that children are our enemies. We need to embrace the Christian worldview that says your body is not your own, but it was bought with a price. It says that true freedom comes from self-sacrifice, not self-sovereignty. It's clear that much of the confusion that we see in our culture today that has led to the abortion movement, from abortion even to the battles of the sexes, it stems from departing from God's design. Feminism became toxic when it encouraged women to resent men and to deny the beautiful differences between men and women. Masculinity is only toxic when it is severed from morality and servanthood. But both men and women, when we look to Jesus Christ as the ultimate model, we find a harmonious vision. We must go back to this Christ-like model. This is real liberation for women, liberation of the lie of feminism and rejecting the betrayal of women. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Shayla. Whew. All right, who needs a box of tissues? Because I do, because, oh man, gosh, that was so powerful. I want to give a shout out.